Why should do people do personal branding? What are the probably best way to do personal branding?
A lot of times, the mistake I find people make is equate social media to personal branding. The problem is that people think personal branding is built only by social media, which is wrong. Social media comes at the end of it. First of all, you have to decide what kind of personal brand you want to be, and then do various things around it. And then later, you do social media. Starting with social media makes no sense.
How does really the brand building works today in B2C?
See, I think some of the classical rules of brand building will not change, right? Brands are what? Brands have to occupy a space in the consumer's memory. To do that, there is an old adage that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will come knocking on your door. It doesn't come. You got to go tell people that you built a better mousetrap. You got to go and demonstrate it. You would probably go to sample it to 100 people, right? So just because you have a so-called better mousetrap doesn't mean everyone is going to come to you. No, I think startup founders today are pretty savvy. The only problem is they think this product is a fantastic product. It may not be a fantastic product, right? I think they give importance to branding. I don't think they ignore branding. I think they give importance to branding. But a lot of time they don't know what will work, right? Which is why I think if you're a startup founder, you got to be very agile. You got to be able to keep changing what you're doing. What are you doing? Give it a particular amount of time. It doesn't work. Switch. I mean, look what was Mintra. I mean, Mintra started off as making T-shirts for companies. For example, empathy. If you're in marketing, especially for a brand manager, nothing is within your control. You're not looking after sales. You're not looking after product development. You're not looking after manufacturing. In fact, even advertising is the agency which is producing, but the market research agency is producing. Money is coming from the finance department. How do you negotiate? And in the importance of empathy, how do you show empathy to get the kind of deal you want?
Ambi, if you are starting your marketing career in 2025, what would you do differently?
If you're starting in 2025, I think you got to embrace tech.
In the 1980s, one TV ad could run for 2 years unchanged. But today you get 8 seconds before someone scrolls away. Media has become infinitely more complicated. Welcome to the Marketing Couch. I am Jaideep. We have a special guest on the show today. Meet Ambi Parameswaran. Ambi is a brand and advertising veteran with over 4 decades of experience. He's also a teacher and a best selling author of 12 books. Ambi chose advertising over engineering as an IIT-IIM graduate in the late 70s. He's built iconic brands like Santur Soap, TCS, ICICI Bank, and ZTV. In my conversation with Ambi, we covered why media strategy needs deeper thinking now, why B2B isn't rational, and how the fundamentals of brand building still rule in the digital chaos. We also covered his counterintuitive take on personal branding and why talking to customers often beat data analysis. Customers today do not seek information, they want transformation. They want before and after stories. I want you to learn Ambi's timeless frameworks that actually work, whether you are launching your first campaign or scaling your 10th. And if you stay till the end, Ambi reveals why most startups are building better mousetraps nobody wants, and his simple framework to fix it. With this, I bring you Ambi Parameswaran. Hi, Ambi. Welcome to the Marketing Couch.
Thank you, Jaideep, for inviting me to be on your marketing couch. I look forward to our conversation.
I have been speaking with a number of marketing leaders, but there are not too many people that I got an opportunity to talk about branding, advertising. And I'm just thinking, who will be a better person other than you to talk about some of those areas. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion today.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you. I'm also looking forward to discussing and tossing the ball around. Yeah.
wonderful. So let's get started right away. You were one of the early batch of IIT and IIM graduates who chose advertising for a living. What does actually, I mean, how did you think about advertising? Was it always your plan to join advertising? Because I can imagine it would be an outlier in those days for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, the question is very loaded. You said that how did I choose advertising as a living? I don't think I did. We are very impressionable when you're in B school, and I was in IIM Calcutta. And quite happenstance, I want to do my summer assignment in the city of Kolkata, and I got a summer project with a young agency called Rediffusion. I looked them up, and very interesting. They started by IIM graduates, and I did 2 months with them, and I got interested in advertising, the kind of work they were doing. For a B school student, even probably today, advertising looks very vague. You always think of some ponytailed copywriters and art directors sitting and drawing stuff. But I got introduced to the real advertising, how it is created, the fact that an MBA can actually play a very good role in creating powerful advertising messages. So that happened, and then when it came to final placement, Rediffusion made me a PPO. So I didn't even sit through placement. Those days, in the late 70s, a lot of agencies were coming to B schools for hiring. Both I am Ahmedabad, I am Calcutta, companies were coming. Companies like Lintas, those days HTA, they were coming to hire.
What were they looking for from a skill sets perspective in advertising?
So I think it's very clear that the marketing world was changing. So there were a lot of MBAs joining the marketing department of companies like Unilever and Nestle and Ponds and companies like that. So in fact, Alec has written about this in his book, and he realized that agencies did not have the firepower to face these MBAs. So they said we should also start hiring them. And that's why Lintas started. When Lintas started, HTA and Clarion and a couple of others also got into the game and started hiring from B schools. So it was around probably 76 or 77 was when uh, IIMs were targeted by the ad agencies. My peculiarity is I am also an IIT graduate. So when I decided to take up this job, a lot of my friends said, look, why are you taking this decision? You majored in both marketing and finance, and you can get, and I was a topper, one of the top students in my class. So they said you can get job in any of these. But I said, look, it looks interesting, and let's see where it goes. So I joined Rediffusion, and I spent 3 years.
Where did you join? Was it in Mumbai or in Calcutta?
Mumbai. When we
Mumbai.
joined, three of us had joined. We were all sent on field training to different places. I spent a month in Rajasthan working with a SEBA sales rep. And when I came back, I heard that I got posted to Bombay. So I got posted in Mumbai, and that's my journey started. I worked with Rediffusion for almost 2.5, almost 3 years. And that's when I got an offer to join marketing with
Okay.
Boots, where I was handling OTC products like Colderin and Sweetex and some ethical products like Brufen. So the reason I moved from advertising to marketing was I said, look, advertising seems to be great fun. I'm learning a lot, but I should go to the other side and see how it is. So I went there. I spent six years in Boots, and then I joined UDI Yellow Pages. I spent 2 years in sales, and then the call came again to get back into advertising. After that, from 1989 to 2016, I was with Ulka, which became FCB Ulka, etc., etc. So if you
Right.
look at my working career, roughly, shall we say 37 years, about 27, 28 would be in advertising, and about 8, 9 years would be in marketing and sales.
Okay. So interestingly, you joined advertising, then you moved to a marketing role, and then you took up sales, and then you came back to advertising, which is actually a good sort of introduction for you to see where the rubber hits road, because you were on the other side of the. You also worked in for the brand and help them grow directly as a marketing person there. That probably gave you early exposure to also how businesses run, right? On the and this was a pharmaceutical business, I guess.
Yes, it was OTC and pharma. But I think the point is what you're saying is right, which is I saw advertising from both sides of the
Both
table,
sides.
both sides.
Yes.
So what can agency do, and
Hmm.
what do agencies not do?
Hmm.
What value can you add,
Hmm.
and what value are clients looking for?
What were your early years of exposure to advertising? Were they mostly print ads or direct marketing? And what was your role then?
See, early days when I was as a young account executive, the brands I worked on were very different. I worked on Xerox, I worked on red and white cigarettes, I worked on Thermax, I worked on Katao saris, I worked on IIT-IIM computers. So it was a wide variety of companies I worked on. Those days, advertising was more straightforward. You had print advertising, which was very important. You had cinema, which is again for certain categories was extremely important.
Hmm.
Television was just coming up then. We had television only in Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, and Madras. And that too, it was black and white. But several brands we used TV. And then outdoor was more hand painted. We had to plan the outdoor campaign carefully. And of course, posters which were used in retail outlets. There were no supermarkets, basically general trade. So it was a very different era. You spent a lot of time thinking of what ad to create. And then once you create the ad, you ran the ad almost unchanged for a year or two or even longer. So this was the era in which I started. And when I moved to marketing, again, the thing was same.
Hmm.
You make an ad for Strepsils, the ad ran for something like 2 years without a change.
Yeah, I mean, so the shelf life was obviously quite longer, and we will touch that part, that aspect, little later in the discussion. But you have written 12 books, and I think was your first book sort of was written more towards your second half of your career? I guess the first half must have been quite busy. Or when did you actually write your first
I
book?
started writing columns
Hmm.
almost in 92 or 93, long time back, right?
Okay, okay,
But then when I came back to Bombay in 94, I got invited to uh, be a guest faculty
okay.
and at NMIMS, and I taught a course on brand building,
Mm-hmm.
strategic brand management.
Okay.
And this was maybe 96, 97. The Harvard cases and all were not available.
Hmm.
So one had to kind of cook up one's own cases. So I wrote my own brands as case studies,
Hmm.
and I used it in my advertising management and brand management course. And then the idea came that why don't I convert these 10, 15 case studies into a book? So I approached McGraw-Hill, Tata
Mm-hmm.
McGraw-Hill then, and they were very keen on publishing the book. But publishing takes a long time. So I gave all my material probably in 98, and the book finally came out in the year 2000.
Okay.
That was the
Yeah.
first book. We called it FCB Ulka Brand Building Advertising Cases and Concepts. Right.
Okay.
So that did well, and then it led to the next book and next book.
Hmm.
So the writing of the book was a part of it's a bridge between my teaching and my professional career, right?
Okay.
The book was called FCB Ulka.
So this book was more use case and case studies driven, right?
Yeah, it was purely case studies, very
Okay.
little theory. I think
Yeah.
14 or 15 case studies.
So your latest book is called Marketing Mixology, and I have been sort of following also the book tour that you are doing in different cities and forums. In this book, you have spoken about four key ingredients, right? That marketers not need to know and build the skills around. Could you talk about some of those underlying thinking or ideas behind the book?
So this is a book, right? It just come out.
Hmm.
It contains four chapters. First chapter is on understanding consumers. Second chapter is on brand building. Third chapter is on negotiation and selling. And the fourth chapter is on communication. Now you may ask, why are you calling it mixology? Right? It could be called simple marketing or something like that. But the idea was that I'd written a mini book 3 years ago or 4 years ago for Amazon Kindle to be used during their Prime Day as a special offer. That was on negotiation. That did very well. Short piece, 10,000 words. The next year, Amazon came back and said, why don't you write one more? And I wrote something on brand building,
Okay.
which also did very well. So after the copyright for both these came back to me, and I had two so-called chapters. And my publisher and my literary agent said, "Why don't you write two more chapters and we make it into one book?" So I wrote a chapter on understanding consumers. I wrote a chapter on communication, and the editor came and said, "Look, these four looks sound different. So can you rewrite?" So I rewrote all the chapters. And then I said, look, normal marketing books don't cover negotiation. Normal marketing books don't cover one to one or one to many communication. They cover marketing communication. They don't cover this, like what we are doing now, this
Correct.
communication.
Correct.
So I said this book is cannot have a simple title like marketing basics or something like. We should think of a different title. So I had a bee in my bonnet that I should give it a title like marketing masala mix, right? So it's like a masala mix. And I said the cover design should be like that of a MDH masala box, right? But my publisher said no, that's a little too down market. And then I said, look, I need a name, right? So I started prompting ChatGPT. This was about a year ago, year and a half ago, when I was learning how to use ChatGPT, and I kept asking for various,
Combinations.
combination. And then
Yeah.
in those 100 names which came, I found the word mixology.
Okay.
So then I used it Marketing Mixology, and then I got ChatGPT to design a rough cover. I shared it with my publisher and my agent. They said, "Yeah, great." And so, while this is the cover has been designed by Saurabh Garge,
Okay.
but the brief I gave to him was the cover done by ChatGPT.
Okay.
And he has done a great job, and kind of using that as a stepping stone to design the cover.
Got it. And what is the metaphor for those bottles? Are those like symbolizes ingredients or essence or
Yeah, it's like a liquor, right? It's like a
okay.
bartender having four different things which he mixes, right? It could be wine, whiskey, soda,
Got
could
it.
be Tabasco sauce or whatever, right? All of them are there. All of them.
Okay, yeah. No, that makes the book quite eye-catchy, and also with the color because yellow stands out pretty loud. So that is great. And how come? So what do you talk about negotiation here? I mean, I don't want to obviously take that thunder. I want people and all of us to read that book, but at a high level, what really is the idea, and how are you connecting that with the overall marketing mixology per se?
So I think in any job you're negotiating, right? You're negotiating a better salary, you're negotiating a better deal, right? And in marketing and sales, it's even more so because you're selling ideas in B2B marketing, which you're a specialist. Negotiation is extremely important. I mean, a lot of deals don't happen because you don't know how to negotiate, or you end up leaving a lot of money on the table.
That's true. Yeah,
So I thought it was good to talk of negotiation, and I've covered a lot of the usual stuff which people like you will know, like things like BATNA and Zopa and all that. But I've also brought in some interesting examples. Like there is this famous story about Theodore Roosevelt's poster and the photographer. So the campaign manager went and used a photograph and printed a million plus leaflets for Theodore Roosevelt's presidential campaign. And after the leaflet got printed, someone asked the campaign manager, "Have you taken permission?" So, and he had not. So then he had two choices. One was to reprint the poster, which would have cost him maybe $1 million, or go to the photographer and ask for permission. Now, if the photographer knows that you've done it, he's going to charge an arm and a leg. So this campaign manager decided to use what we call information arbitrage, right? Or information asymmetry. So he sent a telegram to the photographer saying Theodore Roosevelt is running for president and we are wanting to use a photograph for the leaflet, and whichever photograph we use will get great publicity. So if you want the photograph you've taken of Theodore Roosevelt to be featured, how much will you pay for it? So the poor photographer telegrams back saying, I can afford to pay only $250. So the campaign manager said, thank you. He accepts the $250 and uses the poster which is already printed. So here is the information asymmetry. It would have cost him $1 million. Instead, he got paid $250. And in a lot of marketing situations, you are not fully aware how much does your customer knows. How much can you get out of him? I'm not saying conning him or
yeah,
conning
yeah.
her. Why should you leave money on the table if you can get it? So, starting from there, the chapter covers several other things. For example, empathy. If you're in marketing, especially for a brand manager, nothing is within your control. It's you're not looking after sales, you're not looking after product development, you're not looking after manufacturing. In fact, even advertising is the agency which is producing, but the market research agency is producing. Money is coming from the finance department. How do you negotiate? And in the importance of empathy, how do you show empathy to get the kind of deal you want? It's all covered in that book. I mean, in this
Yeah.
particular chapter, I've covered that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, understood. And I look forward to reading that book. So you, like I mentioned, you have done 12 books now, right?
Yeah, 12. Yeah.
12 books. Obviously, writing 12 books also require a consistent and persistent effort over a period of time because this is a body of work which has probably come over little over 2 decades now, right? 2.5 decades. If I start from 2000 is what you mentioned, the first book was published, but the work probably have started even before, like you mentioned. And if I calculate the time when you started writing on newspaper articles, it probably will be over 30 years. So is there any framework that you follow when you start on a book? How long typically it takes to write a book for you, and what kind of schedules that you have, or anything that all, because this is a forum for marketers, and a lot of marketers actually also like to write, and they have aspirations to writing books.
I think to me, writing is a byproduct of learning. I read a lot, and because I read a lot, I want to put down my thoughts. I write because reading helped me learn, and when you write, it becomes even more hardwired. it goes into your long-term memory. That's how the writing journey is. And every book is a bit different, right? I mean, some books can be thought of, conceptualized, you can put on a structure. I'm talking of non-fiction. You can put on a structure and finish it in 1 year, right? Some books take much longer, right? Currently, this book has come out. There's another book which is kind of cooking for the last 10 years. I haven't still started writing it, right? I still don't know how to write it, right? So that's going on. Like this, there could be some other projects happening on the side, which I may have never write. Okay. So there is no one answer. Unlike fiction is different. Fiction is where you have to write every day. Okay, because the story moves, right? You have to move the story. In non-fiction, you don't need to write every day. So in earlier era, when I used to work full time, my writing was only on Saturdays and Sundays. Now that I have flexibility, I can write any day. But again, I don't write every day. When I'm working on a book project, I spend almost a year collecting the data and organizing it. Then I spent a year writing it and rewriting it.
Okay. So going back to marketing mixology, you talk about those four essential skills. You have now witnessed kind of an evolution of marketing from pre-digital era to this mobile and digital advertising and communications. And everything today that are done from a marketing and communication standpoint is pretty much thinking digital first, mobile first, from that aspect, right? How have these core skills have evolved, those four core skills that you talk about, but leave maybe the negotiation part, but at least the other part, right? In the age of now AI and automation and agents and so on.
Oh yeah, I think I'm not a digital native, right? So I have been picking up digital. In fact, my entire education we never used computers. I mean, the only computer we used were computers which we do those Fortran programming on those cards and stuff like that. I think we had to learn everything afterwards. So I'm not an expert. Having said that, in every chapter, I have tried to cover. For example, if you take understanding consumers, right? Good old days, the only way to understand consumers was going and talking to them. Okay.
Correct.
But today you can sit on your computer and understand a fair bit of what they are saying. Right? You can scrape reviews, you can analyze reviews, but that will only take you that far. Going and meeting consumers may still be important. And today that may be the cutting edge because all your competitors may be sitting on their computer, consumer and talk to them. You will know, digital data will tell you what they do. Digital data doesn't always tell you why they're doing it.
Yes.
To find out the why, you may still have to go and meet them, right? So like that, even same with brand building. Okay, same with communication, how what. So every chapter I have dedicated a bit to the new tools, the new ways of doing it. Okay, but this book is not on only digital marketing. Digital marketing is a completely different era, and I'm not an expert, and therefore I am not. And I think the world is, I mean, the things are changing every day,
Correct. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the other day we were discussing between the difference between, let's say, impressions and views. Now, how does YouTube define view? How does Meta define view?
Yeah.
No one seems to know fully, right? Every other year they keep changing it.
Exactly. And they keep changing the definition. That also sometimes becomes slippery.
So it's I was advising a client who said, look, YouTube counts a view when the consumer has seen the video for 30 seconds. I said, no, please go back and check. It may not be 30 seconds, it may be 5 seconds, maybe 2 seconds.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. One of the points that you mentioned, which is, I think, very critical, at least, in today's marketers, we look at so much of data that basically shows the manifestation of an act. But how many of us really go back and understand and talk to a customer to understand what is the psyche behind this? What were they thinking? Why they chose, why they decided something, what they did? And I think that if we are able to tap into the quality of messaging, the quality of engaging with customers probably will improve far, far beyond than what we do usually. I'm not saying there are teams and people who are not doing it. I was speaking with one of the senior executives in Airtel the other day, and he brought that point that in B2B, where I operate, you learn maximum by spending time with your customers, because these in B2B, a decision made over a period of several months or sometimes quarters, and there are multiple people who are involved, and once a decision is made, then the customer lives with that product or the service for a very long period of time. And therefore, both the pre-sales, but definitely after post-sales, staying connected with the customer, let's keep listening from what is their experience. Is this product is really helping the way that it committed to or promised to, and taking some of those learning back and going back to the product team, going back to the engineering team and fix some of those things and add new features and functionalities is a cycle. It's a continuum, and marketers need to do that part more. So I think that actually resonates pretty well. The point that you mentioned. Ambi, just switching the gear. I grew up in watching Doordarshan soap operas, cricket matches, Chitrahar, and in the breaks we have seen great jingles, great advertising back then. The interesting part that I remember, the recall of such ads are pretty high. Even now, sometimes unconsciously, I'll hum some of those old ads and so on. But fast forward to 2025, the world has shifted to so much of digital and mobile. The shelf life of every piece of content has shrunk, right? Be it music, ads, news, cinema, or even books. And how does modern B2C brand building work in the age of technology? There is so much of technology pushed or technology enabled stuff that we see in our economy, whether it is a 12-minute grocery delivery or a ride hailing services or even on demand bathroom kitchen cleaning services and so on. How does really the brand building works today in B2C?
See, I think some of the classical rules of brand building will not change, right? Brands are what? Brands have to occupy a space in the consumer's memory. To do that, you have to solve a problem for the consumer, and you have to tell a story. You tell a consistent story, the consumer is going to remember your brand, right? So even if you look at the current spate of new companies that come up, they also tell stories. Dream 11 tells a story, or Cred tells a story, but they tell it in a quirky way. Zomato tells a story. They all tell a story.
Mm,
In
mm.
the new era, the smarter brands, while they put out maybe two pieces or three pieces of communication every day, they ensure all the communication they put out sticks to a common platform. Sticks to a platform is the wrong word, but let's say it sticks to the same story. You're not going to suddenly change it. One day you act like a court jester, next day you act as a magician, third day you act as a ruler using Carl Jung's archetype. You're going to confuse the consumer. So if you're going to have a jester, you'll have a jester personality right through. Right? So that is something important. And if you do that, even in this day and age, you will be able to build, because let's keep digital first brands on one side.
Okay.
All your classical brands today,
Like FMCGs.
FMCGs, treat YouTube and Meta like they used to treat Doordarshan and Star TV and ZTV. It's the
Mm,
same way. You create a video message
mm,
being delivered to the consumer.
mm,
Instead of seeing it on a TV, he's seeing it on a mobile phone.
mm,
Instead of seeing it on Doordarshan, he's seeing it on YouTube. Simple,
mm, mm.
right? Now, a lot of things have changed. So when we started making ads for television, compared to ads for cinema, we had to rethink, right? Because the consumer, you
Because of the
cannot show
format. Mm,
Vista
mm.
and one Rekha walking down a beach carrying a bottle of, you know, gold spot. Will be nothing will be seen on TV, right? So you have to make it. Therefore, what we call ECUs and CUs became common. You never had a long shot. You always had a mid shot, right? And you started playing more importance to dialogues between
The
characters in the
characters,
TV
yes.
film. Now that is also going to change because you're not going to be watching it on TV, but you're going to be watching it on mobile phone, which means
Mm.
the space is so limited, etc., etc. And sometimes the consumers put you on mute. Therefore, you need to make sure that you put, super or whatever it is, subtitling. So, the, I think all that will keep evolving, right? But the key thing is, what is a brand? That I've talked about in the chapter. Brand is a story we are telling. Are you consistently telling the same story? If you do that, consumer will remember your brand and remember what you're offering. If you keep changing it regularly, the consumer is going to get completely confused.
Agree. And that probably fundamentally sort of shifts, in my mind, the B2C and the B2B. In B2C, for a long period of time, because you were fighting for mindshare and recall and for products which are maybe for daily cosmetics or bathing soap or maybe Coke or Fanta, where really there is not much of features and functionalities that really are to be spoken, and therefore you are almost like fighting against like a commodity to create to stand out, and therefore I think telling the story, the character played a very important role for you to, as a consumer, to connect emotionally with that piece of product, right? Whether it is a watch, whether it is maybe even like McDonald ads like I'm feeling happy, or Coke like whatever it is. Sorry, McDonald I'm loving it, and Coke is like, maybe, I'm feeling happy and so on. I think all of these moments and the characters and the story is what people remember, and it's mostly impact, sort of impulse purchases, right? Not so much of rational and thoughtful purchases, because that's really is B2C, where brand is so so critical. But in B2B, for the longest period, people thought it is, it is taken by, the decision is taken by multiple people in a very rational way, looking at data, features, functionalities, support, everything. But it turns out, after the SaaS economy, slowly and gradually, every product started looking same. So these are all point products with similar set of features and functionalities, started sounding same, looking same, their website looks same. So it has hit to a similar story what probably B2C was or is, and the only way to cut this noise is now coming back to the story and building a brand. So I was looking at the ad of Zoho this morning, came on Times of India, a full page ad, and then their narrative that, it takes long time to build something sustainable, and they related that to a lot of other props, and then eventually connected back to the company Zoho. And this is at a corporate brand level, not so much on the features and functionalities level, where they talk about they have 55 plus products, they have 138 million customers. Interestingly, the B2B brands now are actually stepping into the world of storytelling. And that, I think, is what is your thought in that?
Okay, so it's a long question. So let me kind of slice it a bit, right? One is B2C. All B2C is not the same. So let's say Coke, Pepsi, chips versus detergents, toothpaste is one category. But you also have products like cars, laptops, mobile phones, right? So which is why FCB had created this high involvement, low involvement grid. I've talked
Mm,
about it
mm,
in
mm,
my book on the chapter branding. Even in B2C, the way you treat a high involvement product will be different from the way you treat a low involvement product, right?
agreed.
So it's wrong to say that all products being bought by consumers is all impulse. It's not. You take probably 6 months to decide on which car to buy. You may take a month to decide on which mobile phone to buy, or maybe 2 months to decide on which refrigerator to buy. Right. So you go through, maybe in your own cockeyed way, you look at capacity of the refrigerator, power consumption, how many shelves are there. We just went through it last week. How many
Right.
shelves are there? Should we buy this brand? Should we buy that brand? Will we get after sales service? What will be the resale value? Blah blah blah. Right. So you go through a fair bit of searching. Compared to that, the complexity is there are many people involved. Right? It's not just the purchase manager. There may be IT head, someone else. All the people are involved.
Correct.
The mistake you normally make is it's a very rational decision. It's very rarely rational, right? It's very, very rarely rational. There's enough emotion there and there is enough complication, which is why in the chapter on negotiation and selling, I've talked about this SPANCO model, SPANCO, which was pioneered by Xerox at one point of time,
Hmm.
which a lot of B2B marketing companies have adopted, which is a bit of a top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, but it's a little different. So it's wrong to say B2C is only emotional, and it's wrong to say B2B is only rational. There is always a bit of rationality, emotionality involved in these purchases. For example,
Right.
an old quote from our worldwide creative director who said that if a consumer buys something for purely rational reasons, he will not be happy, and if he buys it purely for emotional reason, he will not be satisfied.
Satisfied. Yeah.
Right. So rational emotionalism in B2B, obviously there is more rationality and little less emotionality. But if you remember the old adage that you never got fired for buying IBM, today you could say you never got fired for implementing SAP.
Correct.
But if you implement Soho, someone may question you.
Hmm.
Right. Look at the B2B branding stuff which has been done by companies like McKinsey and Accenture. Now, McKinsey doesn't spend money on advertising, but they put out thought leadership. In fact, at one time, they used to come out with a hard copy of the McKinsey quarterly.
Correct.
This
Yeah.
was a controlled circulation. So I knew someone there, and I used to get a copy of the McKinsey quarterly every quarter.
Correct.
Right? And I used to keep it. It was lying around for many, many years. Finally, I threw them out. But today, what have they done? Today, McKinsey quarterly is a website.
Correct.
Everything is available. I tell my students to go and read. In fact, on B2B selling, there are some fabulous articles in the McKinsey quarterly, right? So their brand building is not to advertise front page in a newspaper, but to do this to put out white paper, to organize webinars, to organize seminars. That's also brand building,
That's true. Yeah.
and it's as much emotional as it is rational.
Correct. Yeah. And the fact that, the person behind taking the decision also has his or her personal preferences of vendors. Just because you get along well with me, just because I know you well, just because my friends know you well. So all of that actually also fall in the emotional side or not so much rational side and so on, right? Not just data per se. Yeah, no, I think that was really the objective, is to basically establish that point that B2B is not fully rational. B2B is, like you mentioned, is a combination of maybe more rational, but a combination of rational and emotion both. And we have enough examples on that. So one of the, you touched upon one important point on the TV versus now watching that ad in YouTube today or maybe in mobile and so on. So one of the revolutionary changes in my mind is the economy of media and distribution. The rise of the own media has completely sort of changed the game. I mean, a lot of companies today, a lot of brands today own their own channels on YouTube or social media handles, predominantly owned media. Back in days, like even maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago, the media part was substantive in advertising business. I mean, I'm sure when you were running advertising, large part of the spend was predominantly in media, and there were media planner, there are media strategy, and there are so many other critical functions uh, around media. But that seemed to have completely changed, in the digital era, right? And all of these changes significantly impacted the overall media spend and distribution strategy. What is your take on this, the whole changing economy, moving from, one or two companies owned, or, from a media planning and distribution that used to be one of the core function, and now a lot of it is actually owned by the company itself. Of course, there are mass distribution media like electronics media and other print media are still there, but I think a lot of it they control today by their own media, right?
Yeah, but it's not as easy. If you go back to the 20 years ago, a lot of companies said that I need a very good website. So they built very fancy, nice websites. But what's the point building a website if no one comes, right? So then some intelligence dawned. If you have $1 million, don't spend $1 million on building a website. Spend half a million on building the website and half a million on driving traffic, right? Now, in the new era, that has got further multiplied because driving traffic has become that much more difficult.
Yes.
So if you have $1 million, you spend $200,000 on building your content and spend $800,000 on spreading your content. So if you don't spread your content, all of us think everything will go viral. Nothing goes viral,
Yes.
right? Probably 1% goes viral, which means people are putting out 99 things out there which are all going to sink without a trace. So even going viral, it doesn't go viral just like that. You need to do that first push. And if the first push catches momentum, then it slowly starts going viral, right? And you don't know what will work. So I'm saying, just because you're a very fancy B2B company and you have wide recognition and you put out a fantastic white paper on your website, who's going to read it? So you have to then probably talk to 20 influencers, tell them, yeah, write about it. Maybe give them a trip to your factory to look at your new development. Cost money. So I'm saying, compared to those days, today media has become even more complicated.
Mm,
So you're actually having more people doing it.
mm,
See, those days it was easy. Doordarshan or even later Star Z, you had data, you analyze and you put it out. Today, it's multiple channels. Are you going to use influencers or are you going to use largely search? And how are you going to search? How are you going to select the search term? Which search term works better for you? Which keywords you want to use? Which keywords you will not use? Right? Are you going to use influencers? Are you going to use LinkedIn? Are you going to use Insta? Right? So for my own book, I tried using Insta, but Insta didn't work. Right? What is
mm,
working is LinkedIn.
right.
Right?
Mm,
So it depends. So the people have now realized that media is three types. Right? There is paid media, there is earned media, and owned media. You need to look at all three. And
correct.
a lot of time, what you do is you don't even realize you own this media
Mm,
and you can do something with it,
mm, mm,
which you're not doing, which could be your shops, which could be your retail premises, could be the shirt your sales guy is wearing, that's your own media, right? You're not using it. If you
Mhm.
use it, it will help you to that extent. But
Mm.
my feeling is just because you build a great website, you're not going to get great traffic.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is so important. Again, I was having a conversation with a founder recently, and when you talk to in the technology world with people, everybody has ideas and they are ready to quickly come up with products, and that is what they think is what it takes to build $1 million or $1 billion business, to come up with good product. But it is just the beginning of your long journey, where you actually, I think the GTM is a lot more complex now, rather than building products in the age of AI and agentic AI, right? At least in the technology segment. Sorry,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
absolutely. I think there is an old adage that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will come knocking on your door. It doesn't come. You got to go tell people that you build a better mousetrap. You got to go and demonstrate it. You would probably go to sample it
Yeah.
to 100 people, right? So just because you have a so-called better mousetrap doesn't mean everyone is going to come to you. So this is technology. I remember a very large global company. They invited me for a talk in Bangalore. I was talking to these 25 uh, engineers, PhDs, etc. And they were designing tools to be used by creative designers. Right? So I asked them, have you gone and met any of them? No. I said, what? He said, yeah. They have not gone out of their office to meet people who use their product. So this is the problem, right? So if you got a great product, it will sell on its own. It is not going to sell on its own. And sometimes what you think is going to be a phenomenal success flops very badly. I mean, Segway is a great example, and there was another startup which I read about, which said that we are going to do videos only for smartphones. I forget the name, but that collapsed. So I mean, what you're saying is right. Startup entrepreneurs may think that this is the next sliced bread, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the distribution is such an important thing right now, right? That how do you figure out a way to reach out to your audience in a way that, so for many startups, for example, that you don't make buying decision suddenly and buy an important thing that is going to support your products and services and your customers and engagement with your customers, if you have never heard of them anywhere, right? If you have not got a reference. And that brings to an important point, that a lot of decisions today, especially in the B2C, high value, high engagement kind of product like cars, mobile phones, watches, so on, electronic watches like Apple watches and all of that. Apple is anyway quite established, but that's not a right example. But where you have multiple choices in the category, review of people has become very important, right? In the age of e-commerce, like age of digital, you want to know everything about, even now, even smaller products, right? That you want to buy a mouse, you will go through maybe 30, 40 reviews before spending 500 rupees, because you want to be confident that, because the pain associated with again to changing to another something, so, and you have access and options to go through reviews, that also has changed buying behavior, or sort of influenced buying behavior quite a bit.
Yeah. So I mean, today if you go to a car showroom and you want to take a test drive, even before they give you a test drive, they want your mobile number,
Yeah,
right? And the smarter showroom, they somehow take it out of you, right? Because they know if you're not giving the mobile number, you're not serious
you're
about
not
buying.
serious.
Then why does one not even give a test drive? Why waste half a liter of petrol on this guy? Right? He's going to test drive all vehicles. Finally, he'll probably go and buy, Swift or whatever, right? So they're very clear. And then once you grab the test drive, then the system tracks you. They give you a reminder call 2 days later. They give you another call 7 days later. And then they know that 7, 8, 10, 15 days, the consumer is already gone. So you
Correct.
drop the consumer from your list.
Correct.
But this is what McKinsey did this first work on customer decision journey. They wrote a very important article, and they also wrote something similar in Harvard Business, which is today the journey is very complex. Right? You may start with 3 brands, you may add 2 more brands, you may delete 2 brands, and finally buy a very different brand because you're
Mm.
reading review somewhere. There are comparison websites. You go to comparison websites. You're doing all that. I think B2B also similar thing is happening.
Similar
I'm
thing
sure.
is happening, yes. And sometimes those customer advocacies, testimonials, that's why it becomes sort of deal change, deal maker actually, right? That's what it boils down to ultimately. That, okay, how many good references you have from your long standing, trusted customers in B2B. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that a new age of consulting, solopreneurship has given huge amount of push to this area called personal branding. And I know that you have spoken about personal branding in the past, and so I wanted to know your point of view and takes on personal branding. Why should do people do personal branding? What are the probably best way to do personal branding? And especially for those who are in their independent capacity, running maybe startup owners or early stage of startup founders, maybe they are doing solopreneurship, they are independent consultants, and so on.
So I think a lot of times the mistake I find people make is equate social media to personal branding. So I wrote a book called All the World's a Stage, the personal branding story, where I've tried to explain there are many myths around personal branding. That personal branding is only meant for CEOs. Personal branding is very complex. Personal branding is very expensive. Personal branding takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. Personal branding is just social media posting, right? So I've demystified a lot of this stuff. The problem is that people think personal branding is built only by social media, which is wrong. Social media comes at the end of it. First of all, you have to decide what kind of personal brand you want to be, and then
Hmm.
do various things around it.
Hmm.
And then later you do social media. Starting with social media makes no sense.
Correct.
And of course, once you build a personal brand, then you need to monitor it. You may want to change it. You may want to add something to it. You might want to delete something to it. You know, I think Tom Peters wrote an article almost 25 years ago on brand you, that everyone is a brand, and you better take charge and understand what your brand is and how are you building it. Some of the I know that some startup founders are extremely very fond of seeing their photograph in print, etc., etc., which is also a wrong thing to do. You need to know where to draw the line and what is right and what is wrong. Again, becoming completely reclusive, not talking to media is again a not the right thing to do. You have to find the right balance, which is why I think if you're building a personal brand, you got to have someone who you can go to
Hmm.
for help
Hmm.
and for
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
and for feedback, saying
Yeah.
what you're doing, this is wrong. This article you wrote was wrong, or this
Hmm.
interview you gave was very good. You should do more of that.
Hmm. Yeah. More of those image consulting kind of companies, right?
Not
Um,
even that. A good friend can help you.
hmm.
You don't need to hire an
Yeah.
image consultant, but even if you have a good friend who is willing to talk to you openly,
Hmm.
I do executive coaching. So one of the things I tell my coachees is that learn to go and give talks, and don't get scared. You may stumble, it doesn't matter, right? So the easiest target for you to give a talk is actually go to a college, right?
Hmm.
Get invited to speak at a business school or an engineering college, and those students would love to listen to you because you have a big title, you're working in a big company, right? And you'll get rara, you'll get claps, you'll get bouquet, you'll feel very good. But at the end, you do a self diagnosis: what went well, what didn't go well, and what should you do better next time. So these are simple tricks which you can you can hack it. It's not too difficult. Becoming a personal brand is important.
Yeah.
Understanding that you're a personal brand is important.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess also understanding the brand you, that means what do you really stand for and why should people even care, right? I think that that's so important because like you rightly mentioned, a lot of people today seems first land on social media and then start thinking, okay, what to write, right? But that really doesn't work because I mean people follow people today because they have come to either learn something. So either it is information or entertainment or education, either of these three reasons, right? So where do you fit yourself and who you are is, and also people also sort of watch you, right? That over a period of time, are you changing colors every day? Are you one day talking about, like, if I were to talk about marketing, one day I'm talking about B2B marketing, one day B2C, one day maybe D2C, maybe one day talking about sports and whatnot, is I'm only going to confuse my audience, I guess, right? So that's another important aspect of that. So, one thing that in the context of education, you continue to speak in colleges and address students. Do you see a gap between what people are learning today in marketing, about marketing in college, versus what is happening on the ground?
So I think I've been kind of a guest faculty, and I've been doing some form of teaching for a long time. I was also served on the board of governors of IIM Calcutta for about 10 years between 2007 or 17. I've been on advisory committees, IIT Madras, so I understand a little bit of what's happening in the education field. See, students are changing. They have a lot of information at their command. So if as a professor I'm not engaging them in class, they're going to switch off more and more. The old days that I'm here, you have to listen to me is not going to work. You also have to make sure that you're current. So you cannot. be talking of old stuff because the students are changing. That said, there is growing awareness among students that they have to become alert, they have to learn new skills, they have to become, shall I say, more adept at what is happening. If they don't do that, they're going to lose out, right? So I see both things happening. On the one hand, students are becoming extremely keen on finding out what's happening, how can you help, and I have a somewhat advantage over other academics because I've spent a lot of time in industry. So they treat me a lot differently because of my gray hair. But I'm told the other professors, if they're not relating, my talks are always relating to real business and
Correct.
real issues. But that's the only way I think. And I'm told if a professor doesn't relate it to real issues, real market dynamics, one of the little hack I do is in my class, I often distribute a little article from the paper which appeared, let's say, a month ago or whatever, and tell them to read it and say, what can you, we discussed something, now apply it to this article you got, right? What is happening here? I started it as a kind of an experiment, but students have loved it, right? So you have to keep trying new things to engage them. If you
Hmm.
engage them, you can actually learn a lot. And in fact, my latest book I've dedicated to my students because I've learned a lot by teaching them.
Yeah, yeah. So, moving from students to startups again, and I believe that you consult startups as well from a brand building and marketing standpoint. In terms of looking at the startup ecosystem today that you are part of, what kind of mistakes that you see that founders are making in terms of marketing and brand building? Anything that stands out? Any specific thing that you want to call out and advise in terms of for the startup founders for building brands and marketing? Is building brand is going to be the day one agenda, or is it something that is going to come maybe after a period of time? How does that work?
No, I think startup founders today are pretty savvy. I don't think uh, they. The only problem they make is they think this product is a fantastic product. It may not be a fantastic product, right? The same, better mousetrap problem continues to persist. I think they give importance to branding. I don't think they ignore branding. I think they give importance to branding. But a lot of time they don't know what will work, right? Which is why I think if you're a startup founder, you got to be very agile. You got to be able to keep changing what you're doing. What are you doing? Give it a particular amount of time. It doesn't work. Switch. I mean, look what was Mintra. I mean, Mintra started off as making T-shirts for companies.
Hmm.
I remember
Hmm.
meeting the founders along with Sudhir Sethi invited me and I met them. And they said, can you give us introduction to Mahindra and Tata? We want to make T-shirts and caps for those companies. And I did some introductions for them. But then they completely pivoted, right? They pivoted to fashion
Fashion. Yeah.
and they've gone very far with that.
Correct.
So, but a lot of companies stay stuck and they're not able to get out of that rut. So, one is what is your brand? Are you resonating? Is the question that should I put in more money to promote this? Will it work? Where do you draw the line? Saying if it doesn't work now, let me pivot. So that is something which you need to find the right mentors to tell you that look, this is not working. You better figure out what to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So product market fit is what I'm hearing is important for you to get.
product market fit and decide when do you double down on what you're doing and
Hmm.
when do you pivot. It's
Hmm.
quite possible that you give up too early,
Hmm.
right? So but then you keep putting good money behind bad money, you're going to run out of money sooner or later. So you got to say, look, I'm going to hold back. Like I've done this for 2 years, I've got this far, but it's not going to go further. Or let me pivot, or let me sell. Whatever price I get is fine, let's sell, get out.
Yeah, so knowing when to exit, and that's why probably you need mentors specifically for this particular purpose, right? To get that feedback. I want to quickly touch upon one important point. I think which would be important to discuss from a B2B standpoint again, which is the brand experience. So what happens is, as a marketing team, or you build a brand with over certain positioning and messaging, and there are some promises that you make to your customers, right? But when it comes to the realization of that brand experience or delivering that brand experience, it takes a village basically to come together. I come from the tech industry, so for me it is easy to relate to where brand experience, for example, let's say right from how is their sales experience when they're dealing with the sales team. How easy or difficult was it for them to find information for the company, to closure on sales, closure on, and once the customer comes on board, what has been their journey from onboarding onward. That means that's where rubber hits the road, right? So how is their customer support? How is their product support? What kind of innovation they are bringing in basis vis-a-vis what they promised, and so on. So how does that really work in your view from a B2B brand experience point of view? How do you look at this?
See, I think you touched upon a very important point, which is it takes a village to bring up a child, and that's an old, I think, African saying. Hillary Clinton wrote a book, I think, with
Hmm.
that title.
Hmm.
So it's a B2B space. You need to get engineering, you need to get sales support, you need to get marketing, all of them together to make sure the brand experience is right. Uh, so in the book, I've talked about what Maruti had to do. Maruti in 99, 2000, 2001, Tata Motors, Hyundai, Daewoo, all these people came. Maruti realized that they never used to being a monopoly. Right? People walk in, they will buy. Where else will they go? But that changed by the year 2005. They were under tremendous pressure. So the then CEO of the company, Jagdish Khattar, and his
Correct.
deputy said, "Look, we need to get the whole company to understand the car buyer." So what they mandated was everyone in a supervisory position in the company, whether it is marketing or sales or product development or manufacturing or finance or purchase, supply chain, doesn't matter. You have to go and sell a car in a showroom. You have to go spend a day and sell a car, talk to a real customer. That I'm told was an eye-opening experience for a lot of people because they've never gone and they might have gone and bought a car, but they've never gone and sold a car. So the customer is going to come and ask, why your steering so wobbly? Why is your car so light? Why is it making this noise? So it brought about a great amount of awakening among all the people who did not have direct contact with customers. I think you can apply the same logic to a B2B environment.
Hmm.
Do people in product development, do people in engineering, do people in customer support of course will be meeting customers, but all the others, are they exposed to customers? Do they actually go and meet customers? Do they see what are the customers pain points? If you don't do that, your brand experience will be patchy, right? Unless all these people play together, brand experience will not be what you want.
I think very well put. And I like that example of Maruti that you said, which is essentially spending a day in the field to really, and then sell a car to a real customer, which is again where the rubber hits the road, right? All right. So switching again from there to, you are someone who actually sort of transitioned your career from being a CEO of one of the most well-known and respected ad agency to moving to a consulting kind of position and established yourself and kind of equally busy doing equally important and relevant work in current times, right? So what was your advice for people who are mid-career professionals and looking to switch to maybe an academic career to maybe a consulting career and so on? Any piece of advice you have?
I I thank you for saying all those nice things about me, but I don't know whether whether I deserve all that. But to be fair, I think uh, after I finished my long innings in 2016, I could have easily sat at home and read the newspaper and put all my money in the stock market and tried my hand at stock thing. But I said no, I think I still have at least 10 years or more left. So let me try and be useful to people around me. And I got an invitation from SPJMR to become a adjunct professor to teach. They were starting a new program and they wanted me to manage it. So I went there for that. And then later I transitioned into a kind of a professor teaching full courses, which was not what I had bargained for. Then I got some invitations from some companies which said, "Can you come and do a workshop for them? Can you come and be a, say, brand mentor, brand coach?" So that's how it started. And that's continued. I invested in a few startups, but less said the better. Then I realized maybe some friend of mine told me, I invested about 10 startups. All of them have gone virtually belly up. But so a friend of mine said, no, 10 is too little. You need to invest in 25 startups. I say, enough is enough. I shouldn't blow up all my retirement money in investing in startups. And some of them are very sound startups, excellent, and some of them even won awards and all that. But nothing worked. So startup, I only do advising. I don't
Mm,
invest anymore.
mm.
I do a bit of talking, giving talks and all that, and then of course book writing. So one of the things which I would tell people when you're around 40, 45, you need to think and say, look, are you enjoying your job? Great, but what are the other interests you should have? In my case, it was teaching. In your case, it could be something else. What are the other interests? So by the time you're 45, you should develop the second interest, which should, in the beginning, it will not pay you any money, but it'll keep you mentally active. And then later, you can probably leverage it into getting into money. What I'm also seeing, and I spent almost half a day with the youngster, probably 45-year-old, who had a terrific career in advertising, in strategic planning. And he said, look, at 45, he said, enough is enough. So he said, I'm flexi working. I want to work only 4 days a week, right? 3 days I want to keep for my family. And I'm a quote unquote fractional planning person for 3 or 4 agencies. And I admire him for that because he did it at the age of what, 45, right? It's a very young age to take that kind of a step. But obviously, he said, look, my house is paid for. My wife had a regular job. In fact, she was also in a kind of a flexi kind of a job. So, those are, I mean, I see a lot of people moving into that space that look, I don't want to do a full-time job, but I want to be working. I don't want to go to office every day. So I'll give you 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and you use me the way you want. I maintain my timesheets and I will share it with you and I will not cheat. Right. So I think that's happening. And I think it's a great thing because several companies cannot afford these people full
True.
time.
True.
For example, I'm someone like you,
Hmm.
available as a B2B marketing advisor 1 day a week is great for a company,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's the way some people have figured out their life. Some have said, no, I'll work full time. The other thing is when I coach people, and I'm coaching someone who's 56, 57 years old, and I start in the first session, he says, I'm planning for my retirement. I said, look, how old are you? 57. I said, what's your retirement age in your company? 60. So normally in your company, people get extension. He said, yeah, they get extension up to what? 65. So you got 60, 57 to 60. You got 8 years to go. You should not be thinking of retirement. You should be thinking of the next position in the company. What additional responsibility will you take over? Start thinking of retirement when you're 63 because you don't have any other interest.
Why do you think young people are actually looking more and more for retirement, getting out of the full-time job? What are the? I mean, you talk to a lot of people, and that's the reason I'm asking this. Is there a trend that you see that this is it burnout? Is it that because people are exposed to too much of social media content and rosy stories?
I think it's a combination. I think one is COVID was a reset, right? During COVID, you realize you could do something like this. For COVID, this platform Zoom, I had got introduced to Zoom 10 years ago because I was a board member of a company called Cube Cinema Technologies, and they had a one board member sitting in Hong Kong, one sitting in Japan, and me sitting in Bombay. We used to do meetings on Zoom 10 years ago. We knew Zoom existed and we were using Zoom. But in 2019, 2020, everyone got to know Zoom. Right? Today, you know that you can do a meeting remotely, which gives you flexibility. Right? And so I would say some of the younger people who are, let's say, in their 40s and mid 40s are saying, look, I've made enough, and I know if I can get into a flexible working arrangement, this money can continue for another 20 years. Right? Then why should I go and slog? Because the point is companies, why are you working in a company? Because you see growth, you see career growth, you see title growth, you see other. If you don't want that, then you can easily exit and do something of your own. So it's a combination of new tools, new techniques. Maybe work environments are becoming more and more pressure driven, right? And they're saying, look, we don't want to take that. I'd rather go out. I would say probably a lot of people have done that, maybe in your industry, maybe in marketing communication, etc., etc. A lot of people have gone out and are doing this kind of a gig working. As a number, it's still very, very small, but it's a significant number.
Yep. Yeah, no, true. Ambi, if you're starting your marketing career in 2025, what would you do differently? For those folks who are actually watching this,
If you're starting in 2025, I think you got to embrace tech, right? Uh, you know you got to know Python, you got to know all that, you got to know how to use uh, data analytics tools. So just as when we started at one time, the key skill used to be looking at data, but you use spreadsheets, right? Maximum, nothing more than that. Today that's not enough. You got to be able to scrape reviews, analyze reviews, put them into things, right? So you got to be tech, very comfortable with tech, and tech world is changing and you should be ready to change. So if you're doing that, then I think you got a great career ahead.
Great. All right. And what kind of resources you follow, or what kind of practice you follow? Extensively, you mentioned, but you continue to read a lot of books now, or do you listen to podcasts, or do you watch YouTube videos? How do you keep yourself updated?
I do a mix of all this. In an average year, I read about 50 books, and it's a mix of probably
50 books. Okay.
yeah 50. So about 30 would be business related, 20 would be diverse fiction, non-fiction. I just finished reading a book called The Briefest History of the World, which is a very very nice book, and I read it one trip to Bangalore and back, and I read the book. So I read a lot. Podcast I listen to probably morning walk 1 hour, right? That's it. I mean, of course, I don't do too much of YouTube. Maybe I should. I also have a old student of mine who comes and helps me learn the use of ChatGPT and other such AI tools. I'm still struggling. Yesterday, I tried doing some PowerPoint and it didn't work out too well, and I'm still trying to figure out which tool actually works for creating a good PowerPoint. Maybe I'll reach out to you to find out. So I'm learning all this, and you got to find the time. You
Yeah.
know, I sometimes coach people who said they've not read a single book the previous 1 year. I said, how can you go? You're a senior manager. How can you go through life without reading a single book? And I then give them a book to read. Now read it and like, send me a summary.
Yeah.
So this is also, I mean, they also walk this earth, right?
Right. And before I conclude, I usually ask this question to everyone, all my guests. Where can people connect with you, Ambi?
So I'm active on more active on Twitter.
Okay.
Sorry, more active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Not very active on Twitter or Insta. LinkedIn and Facebook. They can follow me on LinkedIn. Whatever I write,
Okay.
I normally post on LinkedIn a day later. I also share some interesting things which I come across, which I give my views, which may be right, may be wrong. In fact, I posted something and a lot of people question my views, which is right, which is fair, because that's based on my impression, and I expect people to question that.
Sure. Yeah.
Appreciate that, and I try and respond to at least some of the comments which I get. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, but otherwise I normally try and respond to them, and I keep myself active that way. I try and post on LinkedIn maybe twice or 3 times a week.
Okay.
It's a mix of stuff. Sometimes it's about my book, sometimes it's some new article I've written, sometimes something I saw somewhere. So I have fun and I get a lot of comments.
Perfect. So I'll share your LinkedIn handle on the show note. Also, maybe if you share your Facebook handle, I can share that
It's
as
the
well.
same. It's Ambi Parameswaran. It's the same thing.
All right. Okay. It has been fantastic in last little over an hour, and I just didn't realize the time. So it has been really an eye-opening discussion, an engaging discussion, and again visiting some of the basics that I have come to learn in this podcast. So thank you for being part of the show and sharing your insights and also advices for our viewers today.
Yeah. So thank you, Jaideep, for inviting me onto your show. I've listened to some of your previous episodes. They're all great fun, and keep doing this. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who want to learn from people like you, and wonderful. Thank you very much for having me on your show, and
Thank
all
you.
the very best.